I have a question for you, and it might sound a little strange, maybe even a bit dangerous.
Okay, I'm listening.
Can you really be a good citizen?
Yeah.
You know, a polite neighbor, a reliable employee, a rule follower, and a healthy, happy individual at the same time?
Mm.
Or are the rules of polite society and the messy, dark truths of our own minds fundamentally at war with each other?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? Because we're raised to believe that those two things are the same thing.
Exactly.
You behave, you follow the social contract, you push down the bad thoughts, and the reward for that is supposed to be mental health.
Be good, feel good. That's the slogan.
Yeah.
But today, we're diving into a text that suggests the exact opposite. It suggests that being good, at least in the way society demands it, might actually be what's making us sick.
It's a fantastic source. We're looking at an article called Why a Psychoanalytic Code by Phyllis W. Meadow. It was published in Modern Psychoanalysis.
And I have to say, looking at that title, you might think we're about to discuss, I don't know, insurance billing or workplace compliance.
Right. It sounds so incredibly bureaucratic.
Like a seminar you'd fall asleep in.
But it's not. It's really a philosophical thriller. I mean, this text is about the human soul, the death instinct, the Salem witch trials.
Wow.
And why your therapist probably shouldn't be judging your moral character if they actually want to, cure you.
Okay, so the mission for this deep dive is to explore this huge tension that Meadow highlights. It's the tension between civilized ethics, what your neighbors, your boss, the law says you should do, and the raw, often destructive reality of the human unconscious.
And the core argument she makes is, well, it's startling. She suggests that a standard code of ethics, specifically the kind that says the goal of therapy is to make you a productive member of society, might actually prevent a cure.
That's a huge claim. So let's unpack this, because usually we think of doctors or therapists as agents of order, right?
Of course.
Their job is to fix you, get you back to work, make you nicer to your spouse, stop you from yelling in traffic. You go in broken, they send you back out as a functioning cog in the machine.
That's the medical model, exactly. But the source starts by referencing Thomas Saz and, of course, Freud to say, not so fast.
This is what the source calls the fundamental conflict. Patient versus society.
Nice.
So, okay, how did Freud see this?
Well, Meadow points out that Freud made this really distinctive departure from the medical norms of his time. See, in standard medicine, if you have a contagious disease, the doctor treats you, but they're also protecting the town. The doctor serves the community.
Right, the public good.
But Freud considered himself the patient's agent. He explicitly he flat out rejected any obligation to the patient's family or to society.
That sounds almost rebellious. Like, I don't care what the town thinks, I'm on your side.
It was incredibly rebellious, and Meadow argues it had to be. She calls this the double agent problem.
A double agent.
Think about it. If you go to a therapist, and, even subconsciously, that their ultimate goal is to make you a good citizen or to make sure you follow social norms, can you really tell them everything?
Probably not. I'd be filtering myself. I'd be auditioning for the role of sane person.
Yes.
I'd be thinking, if I say this, will they think I'm a monster? Will they call somebody?
Exactly. You'd be performing. And if you are filtering, you aren't doing the work. Meadow argues that an analyst can't do justice to both the patient and society because those two are so often in direct conflict.
The analyst represents the individual's inner world.
And only that inner world. The source calls this a democratic liberal ethic, which sounds political, but it's not really.
It's more about representation, right?
It's a concept from legal philosophy, yeah. The idea is that when two parties are in conflict, say the individual and the collective, they should have separate lawyers.
Okay, that makes sense.
Society has plenty of agents. It has the police, the laws, schools, HR departments, the church. They're all enforcing the rules. They're the lawyers for team society.
So the patient needs a lawyer strictly for their internal reality, no matter what that reality is.
Precisely. Because if the therapist is just another agent of society, then the patient has no one on their side, and that internal reality might contain things society labels as, bad.
And this is where it gets really interesting and a little frightening. Meadow uses history to show why social good is actually a terrible metric for mental health.
Because what is socially good changes.
Right. She brings up the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1692, the witch trials.
This was such a striking example in the text. It really forces you to check your assumptions.
Because we look back on that as just collective madness, right? We think, those crazy people.
Yeah.
But that's not how it was experienced at the time.
No. At the time, the people hanging women were the good citizens. They were the ethical ones.
They were following the rules.
They were following the code of their society perfectly. The community believed these women were destroying crops and tormenting children. So from their perspective, they were acting to protect the public good.
Based on a complete delusion. So if a therapist back then tried to make an accused witch adjust to society, what are they really doing?
They're handing her over to the hangman. Or they're trying to cure her of a wickedness that isn't even real, just to make her fit into a deeply sick society.
So if you align with society, you might be aligning with the delusion.
You might be. She also brings up the Holocaust.
Right.
In the 20th century, people were executed simply for being Jewish because the ruling government, the society, deemed them dangerous. The takeaway is just stark. Society's rules are fallible. They're often irrational.
So basing a psychoanalytic cure on social adjustment.
It's dangerous. You might be adjusting the patient to a delusional world.
That is a massive aha moment. Just because it's the law, it doesn't mean it's sanity. If the analyst acts as a double agent for society, they become an enforcer, not a healer.
Exactly. And the healer's job is to look at the internal reality, no matter how ugly it looks from the outside.
And speaking of ugly, let's go deeper, because it's not just about historical moments. The source talks about the dangerous stuff inside all of us right now.
The unconscious.
Let's talk about the unconscious.
Meadow defines it as the system that organizes our conscious life without us knowing it. It's the puppet master. But the problem is, it doesn't speak English. It doesn't send you a memo saying, hey, you're actually furious at your father.
So how does it speak?
It speaks in symbols, in slips of the tongue, in dreams, and most importantly, in symptoms.
And it's not all sunshine and rainbows down there. This is where Freud's concept of the death instinct comes in. This is one of those Freudian ideas that sounds like a heavy metal band.
It really does. But yeah, it comes from his work Beyond the Pleasure Principle. Freud realized that humans aren't just driven by pleasure and sex. There's also this innate tendency toward destructiveness.
A drive to return to the inorganic state, to just stop.
To stop the noise, to cease existing. So you have a life force and you have a death force. A drive to build and a drive to destroy.
Libido and the death instinct.
Yes. And here's the crucial part that Meadow highlights. If this death instinct isn't expressed or fused with the life force, it doesn't just go away. It has to go somewhere.
It's like physics. Energy can't be created or destroyed.
Exactly. So if you don't express it, it turns outward. As aggression, as war, as violence. Or if you suppress that, if you're a good, polite person who never gets angry, it turns inward.
And what does that look like?
It becomes suicide, self-sabotage, chronic illness, severe depression. You start destroying yourself because you aren't allowed to destroy anything else.
The source uses a great analogy for this that I think everyone can get, the tea kettle.
It's a perfect visual. The source says transference enactments. Those moments in therapy where you get irrationally angry at your analyst for no reason, they serve as a tea kettle releasing steam.
So the therapy room is the one place where you can let the steam out so the whole thing doesn't explode?
Ideally. But society tells us to keep the lid on tight. Society fears these impulses. It says, don't be angry, don't be jealous, don't hate your parents.
Right.
Meadow mentions little Hans, a famous case of Freud's. Hans had this debilitating phobia of horses.
He was terrified a horse would bite him. He wouldn't even go outside.
But the analysis showed the phobia wasn't really about horses. It was a defense mechanism. It was a displacement. Hans was struggling with these intense, aggressive feelings toward his father.
But you can't hate your father.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing for a boy to feel.
Society forbids it. So the mind cleverly moves that fear onto a horse. Because it's much easier, much more acceptable to be terrified of a horse than to admit you want to hurt your dad.
So we create these phobias to avoid facing our own inner badness. Wow. So we're walking around terrified of spiders or flying or public speaking because we're actually terrified of the monster inside our own heads.
That's the theory. We are protecting ourselves from our own death instinct. And that brings us to the mechanics of the cure. If the problem is that we're bottling all this up to be good citizens, what's the solution?
The solution sounds incredibly simple, but I imagine it's also incredibly hard saying everything.
It sounds trivial, doesn't it? Just talk. But Hyman Spotnitz, a key figure mentioned in the text, had this profound insight. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, if there's anything not verbalized, the symptom persists.
Wait, hold on. Even if you understand it, like if I know I have issues with my dad, isn't that enough? I can explain it perfectly.
No. And that is the trap that so many smart people fall into. You can analyze yourself intellectually all day long. You can know why you're sad. But Spotnitz says that until the raw, unthinkable feeling is put into language spoken out loud to another person, the analyst, the symptom, stays.
Until everything has been put into language.
Hmm.
That is a spectacularly high bar. Everything.
Especially the stuff that makes you sound like a lunatic. The goal is for the patient to talk themselves to wellness, and notice what the analyst is not doing here.
They're not giving advice?
They're not giving advice, they're not saying what's right or wrong, because telling a patient you should stop self-sabotaging does nothing.
Right, the source mentions that. You can tell someone you sabotage relationships because you fear abandonment, and they'll say, I know, doctor, and then go do it again on Friday night.
Exactly, because it hasn't been worked through in the transference. This is a critical idea. The patient projects all these old feelings about parents, about authority figures, onto the analyst.
So they start treating the analyst like their dad or mom.
Yes. And according to the source, they fight to maintain the connection. They try to figure out what the analyst wants them to be. It's like a game. The patient is thinking, if I'm a good patient, the doctor will like me. If I say the right thing, I get a gold star.
So they're asking, what does this person want from me?
The psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan calls this the enigma. What does the other want from me? To make this work, the analyst has to be a blank screen, a mirror. They have to let the patient enact these primitive, messy, hateful conflicts without any judgment.
So if the patient comes in and screams at the analyst or says something deeply offensive, the analyst can't say, hey, that's not appropriate.
Correct. And this is where the ethics part of our title really kicks in. If the analyst imposes their own ethics, don't say that, that's rude, or you should really forgive your mother, what happens?
You shut down the steam valve.
It shuts down the entire process. The steam goes right back in the kettle. If the analyst acts like a polite member of society, the patient goes back to being a polite but sick member of society.
That requires an incredible amount of discipline from the analyst.
It does. It requires suspending your own social instincts, which is very hard to do.
I want to pivot to the part of this deep dive that really blew my mind. Because Meadow connects this whole psychological struggle to biology and then to this incredibly vivid poetry. It gets almost cinematic.
It does. She moves from the clinic to the very roots of our existence. She references neuroscience, specifically Antonio Damasio, to point out that these patterns get laid down so early. In the mother-infant relationship, we get wired before we can even speak.
And we emerge with these patterns that aren't always, conducive to growth.
Not at all. But then she quotes this paper by a writer named Shepard, and the imagery, I mean, it is just haunting.
I have to read a couple of these lines. A billion sperm lunge. One wins.
It's so visceral. It just strips away all the romance.
The screaming killer devours. The boiler room of desire. It paints life not as some pretty garden, but as a brutal race.
Shepard describes life as a race out of death, against death, toward death, and this idea that we get stuck in what the text calls ruts of pain and repetition. The ruts toward destruction deepen and dominate desire.
That describes the feeling of being stuck so perfectly. Why do I keep making the same mistake? Why do I keep dating the same wrong person? It's like we are biologically and psychologically stuck in a rut.
And that's where the analyst comes in. Shepard describes the analyst as entering this energy field to release the energy trapped in these deadly ruts.
And how do they do that?
By helping the patient say what has never been said. There's this beautiful line, the analyst catches the fire in the belly of the unsaid and helps you say it.
Catches the fire in the belly. That is so much more intense than listening to your problems. It sounds active. It sounds dangerous.
It has to be, because the forces we're dealing with, the death instinct, the drive to destroy, they're intense. If you treat them casually, you can't bind them. You have to match that intensity with a willingness to hear it. You have to go down into the boiler room with the patient.
Which brings us right back to the central ethical dilemma. If the analyst's job is to catch this fire, to let the patient say the unspeakable, they have to go to some very dark places.
They have to ignore all the no trespassing signs that society puts up.
Right. And this connects to Lacan's perspective, which the source brings up. Lacan said, man's desire is the desire of the other.
Meaning we spend our whole lives alienating ourselves to please other people, our parents, society, our partners. We lose our own sense of I. We become property of the other.
We become what we think the world wants us to be. We're just characters in someone else's script.
Precisely. And the analyst has to enter that gap between the patient's raw drives and their unconscious fantasies. The source calls this the ultimate ethical dilemma. If society's restrictions on impropriety, on what's polite and proper, interfere with the goal of treatment, Something must give.
And Meadow is pretty clear on what she thinks has to give.
She is. She concludes that to cure the patient, the analyst must tolerate the expression of the non-verbalized danger that society fears. If we silence a patient to satisfy society, we fail the patient.
And ironically, Meadow argues by silencing them, we actually endanger society more.
Wait, explain that. How do we endanger society by silencing the bad stuff? Wouldn't letting people talk about their inner killer make them more dangerous?
The argument is the exact opposite. Remember the tea kettle. Unexpressed aggression doesn't vanish. It explodes.
Okay.
Meadow argues that war is the one respected exception to thou shalt not kill, right? Psychoanalysts might argue that war exists because we have no other outlet for these massive collective death instincts. We project our badness onto an enemy and then try to destroy it.
So, letting a patient talk about their desire to destroy in the safety of an office might actually prevent real destruction out in the world.
That is the core argument. Words bind the energy. Words are the only way to stop the death instinct from becoming actual death. If you can say it, you don't have to do it.
The speech acts as a containment vessel for the fire.
Which makes the talking cure sound like a genuine public service.
In a way, it's the ultimate public service. By facing our own darkness individually, we stop needing to project it onto our neighbors. We stop needing witches to burn or enemies to fight.
But it requires an analyst who is willing to suspend the code of the public to achieve it. It's a fascinating paradox. To be truly healthy, we have to stop trying so hard to be good.
At least in the privacy of our own minds, we have to acknowledge the parts of ourselves that society finds unethical. We have to look at the screaming killer inside, as Shepard put it, and give it a voice so it doesn't need to take action.
We've covered a lot of ground here. From the witch trials and the fallibility of social norms, to the neurobiology of being stuck, to the poetic ruts of death.
It's a dense web. But if you take one thing away, it should probably be this. Mental health isn't about conformity. It isn't about being normal or nice. It's about integration.
Integrating the dark with the light.
It's about accepting the full scope of your humanity, even the parts that aren't polite at a dinner party.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, just going about your day?
I think it challenges us to look at our own politeness. We spend so much energy hiding our primitive impulses, our anger, our selfishness. We think we're protecting the people around us by suppressing it all. We think we're being good. But are we?
That's the final provocative thought I'd leave you with, and it's derived directly from this text. If we're all walking around with these primitive, lethal impulses in our unconscious, and Freud insists we are, is the person who politely hides them actually safer than the person who speaks them out loud in a contained space? Or is that polite silence just a ticking bomb waiting for a trigger?
It's a question worth asking the next time you bite your tongue to keep the peace. Sometimes the most ethical thing you can do is admit to the unethical thought.
That's it for this deep dive into the ethics of the unconscious. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep asking the hard questions.